Now, a bizarre event yesterday. A couple of drones are seen to attack the Kremlin. One of them explodes or goes off like a firework at the top of one of the Kremlin buildings. And Russia say that this is the United States through Ukraine attacking the Kremlin in a bid to assassinate President Putin. In response, of course, Russia, the United States say, no, this is a put-up job by President Putin. He's doing this to say to his own people that he's under attack, and that will lead to some terrible, horrible things happening in Ukraine over the next few weeks, and he's got the excuse with his own people to do it. I've got to tell you, when we get stories like this, there are times when I simply haven't got a clue what really went on. I suppose I lean towards it being Russia having done it themselves and using it as an excuse, but I don't know. But somebody perhaps with a better idea than me is Colonel Hamish De Bretton-Gordon, OBE, former commander of the 1st Royal Tank Regiment. Hamish, great to have you back on the show. What do you make of the events that took place at the Kremlin yesterday?
Good evening, Nigel. Great to be on your show again. Well, I think it's absolute hogwash and bunkum that Russia is claiming that it's the US or the Ukraine responsible. Why would they do it? Why would they tempt Russia to escalate? And the Russians have said for some time they're going to escalate, they're going to go nuclear. Where is the tail fin of that drone with a Stars and Stripes banner on it? Perhaps the QC branch of the KGB are knocking it up at the moment. But it was a pretty pathetic attempt to assassinate Putin if that was the case. I think there are two other more likely explanations. You've mentioned the Russian false flag. That would be plausible. That would then give Putin an excuse to escalate into some form. But I don't think he can. We could talk all night on why I don't think he can escalate to a nuclear fashion. The other element to it is, of course, that Putin, to a lot of people in Russia, they see Putin as the great winner. And he wants to reinforce that. But for a drone to get through the air defenses, and the Kremlin is better defended than Buckingham Palace, I expect. And for a drone to get through just shows, how poor the Russians are. The third likelihood is that it's Russian separatists. There are a lot of very hacked off Wagner Group criminals who don't think much of Putin these days. And there is a growing resurgence of people in Russia who want to see the end of Putin. So definitely not the Americans or Ukrainians, perhaps the Russians, perhaps separatists. But who knows? A pretty pathetic attempt overall.
Yeah. And it was hardly a big explosion. It was hardly a big drone. But Hamish, I just wonder about this war. A very interesting comment overnight I've seen from Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running to be the Republican nominee. Now, he's not going to win, but he's a very intelligent young man. And he's made a point overnight, and it's been on my mind. He's basically saying that Putin has now become China's proxy. We've driven Putin, or he's driven himself, into the arms of China, and that effectively what China want is for Putin to continue this war as long as possible, to exhaust those that are backing Ukraine in terms of munitions, and goodness me, we're down to just a few thousand artillery shells in this country as we speak, and that this is all somehow a cover for China to invade Taiwan. What do you make of that theory? And do you feel, as I do, that increasingly Putin frankly can't move or do anything without the Chinese saying yes?
Well, Nigel, I agree. It's a really complex situation. The Chinese are definitely playing a role here. But the fact that they're not arming the Russians, I think that is probably a significant thing. I agree that, the Chinese, it sort of gives them a red light to invade Taiwan if they see fit. But also, you'll know far better than me, I expect, that China is so reliant on the US economy, on the European economy and the British economy to keep its strange brand of communism going, that it has, it doesn't want to see the death of those. I also agree with you that Putin is trying to draw this war out as long as possible, throwing the young men of Russia into the meat grinder so that the US in particular start to lose faith in the Ukrainians, stop giving them the weaponry they need. And of course, again, with the US and the UK having elections coming up in 12 months, politicians here and over the water are looking that way. That's why it's so important that we enable Ukraine to get this over with as quickly as possible. And I'm confident if we give them the ammunition that they're short of at the moment, we've already given them the tanks and everything else, that they can prevail. But you're right, China is where we really need to be focusing once Russia is sort of out of the game, which I hope they will be soon.
Well, we'll see. It's a sort of 1916-17 style war of attrition, it seems to me, that is going on, and pretty ghastly. Now, yesterday I was with President Trump, and I talked about this war. He said he could end the whole thing in 24 hours by getting Ukraine and Russia round the negotiating table. A final thought, if I can, Hamish, from you. Why does there appear to be so little talk of peace?
Well, I think there are a number of things there, and maybe Trump can spread his magic in some way, but President Zelensky is not in he's not in a mood to negotiate, and so he shouldn't. It is the illegal invasion by Russia of the Donbass in 2014, and then the Crimea, and then Ukraine as a whole. Ukraine is doing well. They have given the Russian military an absolute kicking, and we're not going to see them again for another 10 years or so. So I think for Zelensky, he sees no need to negotiate at the moment. But we, I think, in the world community, want to see this over as quickly as possible. And some negotiation will happen at some stage, but I don't think Zelensky's in the mood at the moment, and I don't think he should be.
Well, just final quick thought, if I may, while I've got you, is Zelensky's desire to retake Crimea, is that even realistic?
I think it is very realistic. The key thing is Crimea vital ground for the Ukraine and for Russia? It sort of probably is, and I expect any negotiations that happen in future, Crimea will be a key part of it. But I'm confident that the spring offensive by Ukraine could well roll up Crimea relatively quickly.
Well, Hamish, you may well be right. I just think history shows us never, ever underestimate the Russians, however dire their situation looks. All will be revealed. Hamish De Bretton-Gordon, thank you for joining us tonight here on GB News.